Well, hi, you guys. Welcome to Touch Base Thursday. This is I think it's the 14th day of May. And it's been a long journey, hasn't it? And I'm sure you're getting tired of doing just this video thing, and so am I. But it is what it is for right now. And I have some things on my mind or my heart today that I'd like to just share with you. A little bit different than some of the other Touch Base times we spent together. But some things that I think I would like to say to us. I think the Lord would want to say to us in the midst of this particular point in this crisis. And I've said from the very beginning that there are three or four, but I've got three things in my mind that this crisis has created. One of those, it has created questions, and it should create questions. About life and about God and about how He fits and how this works and about death and about Christ, these calamities that happen, because this has been a pretty major deal. So it probably has raised some questions. Secondly, I think this crisis has created courage, and we've seen that in so many people in so many ways. Obviously, those first responders, those frontline people, medically, in the grocery stores, the law enforcement. But there have been a lot of other people that have done all sorts of courageous things, from young children to elderly people. And so this has created courage. We ought to honor that and lift that up. But the other thing that it has created, I think, is conflict. And I think we're beginning to see that more and more. Some of the conflict that already existed, this has simply magnified that. And now in this process of reopening, there seems to be all sorts of additional conflict between people. And our political world seems to be living that out to a degree that I find very discouraging and very disappointing. And then there's conflict on all sorts of other levels. And I'm afraid, I'm concerned, I am deeply concerned that we, the body of Christ, could be sucked into the conflict. That individually or even corporately, we get sucked into the conflict. And we begin to have conflict even among ourselves. And so this reopening process could do that. Not only in our church, but in other churches. And not only in the church, but as the church begins to engage the culture and be involved in the culture, which we should be. But my concern is that doing it in this area of conflict is a no-win. In fact, we lose the ability to speak the gospel in the midst of it. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to read a passage. So it's 15 verses long, so it's going to take a little while, and I'm not going to try to make a ton of comments about it. I'm going to read it. It's Ephesians chapter 4, the first 15 verses. I'd like to just read through that. And I'd like us to try to take all the hang-ups that we have and all the strong opinions and all the frustration and begin to say, you know what, I wonder if the church has an opportunity in the midst of this conflict to be so different from the rest of the culture. That somehow we would shine like a light in the darkness. That we're not going to participate in conflict, we're going to participate in unity. It starts with us, inside the church, Christians, inside the body of Christ. It starts with us, with each other. And then we can begin to live that out in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our state, in our nation, and around the world. Because the world's in upheaval. There are so many people struggling and hurting, whether it be physically, the starvation that's beginning to happen in the country of India. Places like even closer to home in Haiti. Obviously, you go to the store and sometimes there are shelves that are empty. Now, we're not starving to death, but there are people who are hurting. And instead of entering into this conflict, in this battle, in this kind of beating on each other, I wonder if the church could be different. We could enter in and be a light in the midst of the darkness. We could be salt in the midst of a tasteless world. So it starts right here in the church. So let me just read this for you. Chapter 4. I'm reading out of the New American Standard. I usually teach out of the ESV, the English Standard Version. I kind of cut my teeth as a new Christian on the New American Standard, so it's really my favorite. I'd like to read from that. It says, this is Paul speaking to the church in Ephesus. He says, I therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, entreat you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called. You see, we've been called to something different, something higher, something better. And he says, I want to entreat you, I want to encourage you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling that he has given us. We're to be a different kind of people. We don't fit in this world and all its systems. It's something else, something higher that God has called us to. He says, and I want you to do that with all humility and gentleness, with patience, showing forbearance to one another in love. We won't come and sit at the table and begin to have a win, I'm going to win over you kind of attitude. But we show forbearance to each other out of love. He goes on and says, be diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. That's the kind of people we're supposed to be. There is only one body, one Spirit, just as you also were called to one hope, in one calling, a hope for your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God, and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. That means he's all. It means he's sovereign. He's providential. He owns it. He has all authority and he has all power. Wow, that's incredible. He says, but to each one of you, each one of us, grace is given according to the measure of Christ's gift. And he goes on and he says in verse 11, and he gave some as prophets and some as prophets and others as evangelists and some as pastors and teachers and for the equipping of the saints for the work of service to the building up of the body of Christ. So now I equipped and I gifted every one of you to build up the body of Christ, not tear it apart. But let's build it up. Until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. As a result, we are no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine and by the trickery of men, by the craftiness and the deceitful scheming. But speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects into him who is the head, even Christ, from whom the whole body, being fitted and held together by that which every joint supplies according to the proper working of each individual part, causes the growth of the body. Now listen to this, the growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. You see, we all have a responsibility to build up the body of Christ, to work at unity. And what that means is to speak the truth, but do it in love. And remember back in Ephesians chapter 5, or it's going to be here in about a chapter, he's going to say, submit yourselves one to another out of reverence for Christ. And that we would commit ourselves to being people of unity and people of peace, people of grace and a people of love. And I think our nation, I think our community needs us to say to each other, we are the body of Christ, and we are not going to have a civil war. We are going to seek unity and peace. And then together we can engage a culture with an answer for the issues of life that go far beyond whether we wear a face mask or not. It is really the issue of caring and loving for one another in the gospel that gives reason to believe and have hope that there is an origin, there is meaning to life, that there is a moral system that really guides us in life, and there is a destiny for each one of us that answers the fundamental questions of our lives. And so let's work at having unity and togetherness and peace. Maybe our country could do better if the church will step up and be the church. That's my encouragement for us today on this Touch Base Thursday. All right, I love you guys. May God bless you in everything that you do. All right, we'll look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.